So what we'll do is we'll talk about preparation for year-end. We'll talk about 1099 vendors, and we'll talk about the calendar year-end versus the fiscal year-end and what you need to do to prepare for that. Some resources that you can turn to for assistance if you should need it. We're also going to talk about some things regarding payroll and end of year, how to process the payroll end of year, how to obtain the reports that you need, file all of the quarterly and year-end forms that are needed, W-2 and W-3 forms, tax table updates, and some other considerations, including Affordable Care Act, and questions and answers at the end. So preparing for your calendar year end, first you would like to make sure that you have a disaster recovery plan in place so that if you need to recover from a backup, you can. You want to make sure that your paperless office is set up to capture your reports in PDF format. If they're not, or if you're not sure, please reach out to RKL support and they can help you to determine whether they're set up properly and get it set up properly for you if not. You always want to create a copy of your live company before closing the year, and this is regardless of whether you have payroll, whether you are running accounts payable, whatever modules you have, you just always want to create a copy of your live before closing. It can be offloaded somewhere else if you're concerned about space, but you just want to have that at least for the first couple of weeks of the year where it can be easily restored. And calendar year versus fiscal year. Okay, so there is a file that is released by Sage that must be uploaded and installed prior to processing your year-end tax forms, and it's called the IRD, or Interim Release Download file. Normally it comes out around the third week of December, so we're projecting approximately December 23rd. We will be checking daily as the date comes closer, and we will be reaching out to those of you that we know will need this, and we can assist with getting it downloaded if necessary. One thing you want to do now is check to see what version your Sage 100 is. The IRD is only compatible with 3 versions, version 2019, version 2018 with Product Update 2, and version 2017 with Product Update 5 or higher. So if you need that installed, or if you need to upgrade to a higher version in order to be compatible, reach out to your RKL account manager. The information for your RKL account manager will be at the end of this PowerPoint, if you don't know who they are. Okay, so to determine your current version, there are 2 views that you may be using. The first is the classic view, and it's the view that's been around in Sage 100 for many years. If you're using that view on your desktop, click Help, and then click About Sage 100, and then you'll see the information come up on the right-hand side of the screen. If you're using the standard view, it's similar. Click Help, then click Sage 100 on the right-hand side of your toolbar, and then you'll see the information appear. So we'll talk about 1099s for the next few slides. If you have any vendors that require 1099 forms and you've been tracking them as 1099 vendors in vendor maintenance in Sage 100 throughout the year, the first thing you'll need to do is make sure that you have your federal ID number stored in your company in Sage 100. You would go to Library Master, go to the main menu, and then Company Maintenance, and confirm that it's there or enter it. Next, you would go to Accounts Payable to the Reports menu, and if you are on version 2017, you'll see Form 1099 eFiling and Reporting, in which case you would then choose the form type and put in your minimum year-to-date payment. Make sure the 1099 calendar year is 2019, and then you would proceed from that screen to the next. If you're on version 2018 or 2019, you would still go to Accounts Payable Reports, but it's called Form 1099 Tax Reporting. You would still choose your form type. Then you would click Minimum Year to Date, and then box by box, you can determine what your minimum will be. So that's a little bit of added functionality in those versions. So the 1099s are processed through a third-party product called Atrix, which is built into your Sage 100. And after you have gone through the initial screen that we showed in the previous slide, you will be presented with an option to update your forms. What this does is downloads all of the current forms for 2019. You can choose Automatic Update, and it will just simply walk you through the download and the installation, and then it will show you Update Complete. If that does not work, then the second choice would be Download Update, which would give you a website to click, and then you would simply download the executable file from that website and install it. It's very easy. There are no trick questions or anything, but if you do need help with this, please reach out to our support department. You're always going to want to test your 1099s before you run them live. So you would choose, I want to test drive, and normally it would be with only the first 25 of your recipients, if you have that many. Okay, and then it walks you through several screens that are very self-explanatory and have one or two questions until it takes you to a screen that's similar to the one you're seeing on this PowerPoint, where it will ask you to verify all of your vendor information, the addresses, the income, the tax IDs. It pulls that information from vendor maintenance, as well as pulling the actual 1099 payment information that has been accumulated throughout the year. You can make changes to any of that information as needed. Just be aware that if you do make changes to that information, it does not feed back to vendor maintenance or to Sage 100. It remains in Atrix. You can electronically file your 1099s, or you can order forms. If you order forms, you can either go to Sage Checks and Forms on Sage's main website, or you can call the 800 number listed and order forms through them. And the same stands for W-2s as well. If you do need to change any of the payment information and you're not sure what it should change to, you can go to Accounts Payable Reports menu and run the Payment History Report. It gives you an option to limit this report just to 1099 vendors. So if the vendor is not set up in Sage 100, or it was set up in the middle of the year and the information isn't correct, you can run your Payment History Report. Then you would go to Vendor Maintenance in Sage 100, click the Additional tab, choose 1099 History, and then update all of the necessary boxes with the necessary information. And then you would go back and you would rerun your 1099 forms. As an alternative, when you're in the Atrix wizard and you're running your 1099 forms, you can make the corrections there. Just be aware that they will not be fed back to vendor maintenance. This is, to me, the most important screen in the wizard, because this is where you may accidentally choose to electronically file and be charged for it. So if you choose the right options in these screens, then if you're choosing not to electronically file, the total cost at the bottom of the screen should be zero. Okay, and you want to be careful of that, because when you first click Print My Recipient 1099 Copies, it checks a couple of other boxes that are related to charges. So you want to continue checking boxes and confirm that the total cost is zero if you simply want to print and not electronically file before you move forward. Okay, so that's your 1099s. Now for your fiscal year end, which may be the same as your calendar year end or not, there are a few things that you'll need to do to prepare for that. And that has to do with going into your general ledger and your other module setups and either confirming that the setups are correct or setting them up correctly. The first is to go to your general ledger fiscal year maintenance, which is under general ledger setup menu, and set up your fiscal year for next year. It's not necessary to do that if your fiscal year is based upon calendar months. The system will automatically reproduce a fiscal year identical to your current fiscal year unless you go in and make changes. So if your fiscal year ending dates for each month are different than the last day of the month, then you'll want to change that in fiscal year maintenance before closing your fiscal year. Also, in your general ledger options task under the setup menu, there are a couple of things that you'll want to check, such as your source journals. If you choose to have them reset at year end, they will be reset. So if you want that to happen, make sure that it's set to year end, and if you don't, make sure to change it. If you are utilizing budgets within Sage 100, also in general ledger options, there is the option to check the box to copy your actual numbers to your default budget at year end. So you want to make sure that that's checked or unchecked before you close the year. Okay, and then for each module that you're actively using, you want to go to that module, you want to go to the setup menu, and then you want to click the options task for that module. Verify the period that your module is set to, and also verify the history that is chosen to be maintained. When you close your year end, the history that is beyond that range will be purged. So simply make sure that you have enough years worth of history chosen before proceeding with year end. Okay, so the reconciliation that you'll be performing for your fiscal year end is first to make sure that all journals and registers are posted, including general ledger. Reconcile your purchases clearing report and confirm that all entries on your report are purchase orders where you're still waiting for a receipt or an invoice. You'll also want to address your negative tiers in your inventory management module if you have any items that are set up with the valuation method of LIFO, FIFO, lot, or serial. And those tasks can be found in Inventory Management module under the Period End menu. Run your trial balance reports using the posting date as the criteria. Run your aging report, and that uses the invoice date so they won't necessarily tie out to each other. And then validate those reports with your accountant and perform any additional reconciliations or adjustments that may be needed before you close the year. And on the left, there's a list of all of those reports. Okay, so in the order of closing, the tasks are listed here. Starting with bill of materials, moving along to work order, manufacturing. So you're working through your manufacturing modules and then to your distribution modules, which is purchase order, sales order, and inventory, on to payroll, and then to your accounting modules, AR, AP, job cost, and bank reconciliation. And then the last module to be closed would be general ledger. So for each module, there is a period end function that must be performed, and it automatically advances that module to the next period, purges any history or completed transactions depending on the module option settings that you have defined. And then if you are using temporary customers or temporary vendor, which is a feature in accounts payable or receivable, then they will be purged also if their balances are zero. That is another function of end of year. A couple of things to keep in mind about period end. When you browse in vendor or customer maintenance or inquiry, if you go to the summary or history tab, a couple of other tabs as well, the fiscal period and year that appear by default are the current fiscal period and year. And any rolled up period to date, year to date information will be according to that period. So when you close the end of year, your fiscal period and year in these screens will automatically default to January 2020. If you need help with these period end checklists, or if you have any questions or issues, certainly feel free to call RKL support, but you do have some built-in tools right in your Sage 100 that you can access. If you go to Help Topics and then you go to Index, you can access some checklists and any other help topics that may be available online. So just in closing, a few tips. Period end reports need to be run before you close the period. When you run period end, it will purge the history in Sage 100 based upon the number of years worth of history you've chosen to keep for each of those modules. You do now have purchase order history, which wasn't available in previous versions, but is available in versions 2017 and higher. So that will be affected as well. Your general ledger period controls the period that can be posted, which is why general ledger would always be the last module that you would close for a particular month or year. So if you close accounts payable for December of 2019, and that's in January 2020, but general ledger is 1 month ahead of that, then accounts payable January invoices won't be able to be posted. So general ledger should always be equal to or behind the periods that the other modules are in. General ledger period can be reopened. So if you do close it and then at the end of January you find that there is a journal entry that needs to be made or some other adjustment, you would simply go to your setup menu and go to your options task and change the period and or year back to what it needs to be. A word of caution about that is if you do that, then in order to move the period ahead, you'll need to re-perform period end processing under the period end menu. Something else to keep in mind is that if you go to company maintenance, which is in Library Master under the main menu, it does give you the option under the Preferences tab to restrict posting to the current period and one future period, which means that if you are currently in the period of January 2020, users cannot post any further than February of 2020. This also means that you'll need to promptly close your periods in order to allow your users to be able to post properly. Close your modules every period, if possible. That is kind of a soft suggestion for general ledger. What many companies do is keep their general ledger open throughout the year so that when they are performing end of year reconciliation, they can go and make changes and small adjustments into prior months without having to reopen periods. At the very minimum, general ledger should be closed for the year. And always have a year-end backup before you perform year-end processing. Okay, so we're going to talk about payroll now and some things that need to be done in payroll to prepare for end of year and to perform end of year. Payroll periods are not in months, they're in quarters, and then you have an end of year period processing. If you're on Sage 100 version 2017, then when you perform either quarter end or year end processing, then the data is purged from the system and it can only be recovered by restoring from a backup. So a backup is critical when performing year end, but also when performing quarter end throughout the year. And you don't want to start entering payroll for the new quarter until the backup company has been created and the year end has been completed. Another thing you want to do in your payroll setups, which is under the payroll setup menu, payroll options task, is to verify that retain perpetual payroll history is enabled. And that needs to be done before the first 2020 payroll in order to retain the history necessary in order to file your Affordable Care Act documents from Sage 100. If you're on version 2018 or 19, then when payroll period and processing is run, the quarter-to-date and the year-to-date data is stored in the system. Under your payroll options in your setup menu, you do define now the number of years that you would like to keep of history, which is the same as you're currently doing for your other modules. The minimum amount of years that Sage allows you to store is 4, which includes the current year. But you can store upwards to 99 years worth of history. And regardless of the fact that this is being retained, we strongly recommend that you make a backup of your company before you run your year-end processing to avoid any issues. The process for period end is as follows: process last payroll for quarter, perform a backup, create a new company to use as a copy of the live to be used as a backup, print your quarterly reports, print or e-file your 941 and state forms, and then upload the IRD, Interim Release Download, that will be made available by Sage the third week of December approximately. Print your W-2 forms, perform all of your period end processing to clear out your quarter and year-to-date data if you're on 2017 or lower. If you're on 2017 or lower, update your tax tables prior to processing the first payroll for 2020. And then you may need to manually update some tax tables for your state unemployment, disability, and local taxes. This still applies to 2017. Then you're ready to process the first payroll for the new year. Okay. So for quarter and year-end processing, the reports that are recommended are shown here, circled in red. Some of them are from the payroll reports menu, and some of them are from period end. This is if you're on 2017. If you're on 2018, they are all on the reports menu. Your quarterly governmental report will be processed in Atrix. And here is a list of all of the reports and the information that they contain. I'm not going to suffer you through them. You will be provided with the PowerPoint, and this is great referential information for you. Okay, so the interim release download that we've been speaking of, it will be on Sage's website approximately December 23rd. They don't publish the date in advance, so we do start looking somewhere in and around the 16th or the 17th. It's possible that it may be available on the Thursday or Friday before. It needs to be downloaded and installed before running W-2 forms. And you need to be on a supported version of Sage 100 in order to be able to install it. The supported versions are listed here: version 2017, update 5, version 2018, update 2, with Payroll 2018, update 5, and then version 2019, update 0 or higher, with at least Payroll 2019, update 1. Okay, and that may look a little confusing because starting with version 2018, Payroll now has its own version. So your version of Sage 100 does not need to match your Payroll version starting with 2018, but you do need to be on certain levels of both in order to be compatible with the uploading of the IRD. If you need to install a new product update to get up to the correct level, then you'll need to obtain new unlocking keys from Sage, which we can assist you with. Federal and state tax reporting. It's called eFiling and reporting if you're on version 2017. It's called federal and state tax reporting if you're on version 2018 or higher. This is where you will run your quarterly tax forms and your W-2 forms. Again, the IRD is required prior to running your W-2s. This requires an installation on your workstation. It doesn't require an installation for each version. So if you have this installed already on your PC and you have since installed a Sage 100 version update or product update, you'll be fine. You don't need to reinstall the Atrix. It may prompt you for the download of new forms, and you can choose automatic update or you can choose download update, as we saw under the 1099 information. It is necessary that you have an active Sage Business Care plan, an internet connection, and be on one of the supported versions. Okay, so your quarterly tax forms in 2017 are under the period end menu. For both 2017, 2018, and 2019, to go to period end processing, you would go to the period end menu, and there you would find your federal and state tax reporting. There is some information also here about exactly how to go about producing the 941s and the 941 Schedule Bs. So at the calendar year end, you'll either print or electronically file your W-2 forms through the period end menu, federal and state tax reporting. Your IRD will have been installed first. And the W-2s should be printed not from your backup company, but from your live company. If you are on version 2017, because the history is not stored, they do need to be printed before the year-end processing is performed, since all of the year-to-date data will be cleared automatically during year-end processing. If you do need to reprint a W-2 after year-end processing, then you will reprint that from your backup company. So payroll, period end, federal e-filing and reporting if you're on 2017 version, federal and state tax reporting if you're on 2018 or 2019 version. Okay. And it walks you through a wizard, and you see the first page of the wizard listed here. And you just need to make sure that you have the right options chosen, including the year on the left-hand side. If it has prompted you for the forms download and it has downloaded all of the correct forms, then you'll see all of the correct year forms listed, and you'll choose W-2, W-3. If you are printing a W-2 from a backup company, then you'll just need to edit the company data, such as the name and the address, etc., to match the live company. And don't allow the name eFiling to be confusing, because you do have the ability to print, not electronically file your forms. We have a guide that we can supply to you if you need it, and it will walk you through in the guide each of the screens that are presented and what the responses should be, although they are fairly intuitive. Performing period end in the live company to close out the quarter. Make sure all of your quarter and year-end reports are printed. Make sure that your W-2s have been printed or electronically filed. Make sure you have a backup company. And then you'll go to payroll, period end, and then period end processing. It's a little bit different in 2017 than it is in 2018, so we've shown both of these screens. In 2017, you would need to choose quarter and year-end processing. And then there is a warning that flashes up just to make sure that you've got your W-2 forms printed. For 2018 or 2019, you don't need to process this any differently than you do any other quarter end. It knows that you're at calendar year end, and it will perform the additional year-end tasks that are necessary. You just need to click proceed and move on. It also doesn't give you the warning about the W-2s because you do now have the history being retained. So if you're on version 2017 of Sage 100, you will need to upload a new tax table before performing your first payroll for 2020. You can go to the Sage website and download the tax table, which will be available approximately at the same time as the IRD. So I would go and look for that somewhere around the 23rd. You also may need to make changes to your state unemployment, disability, and or local tax rates in tax table maintenance after that, if any of those apply, to reflect the correct rate. And to do that, you would go to Payroll Setup menu and Tax Table Maintenance. Okay, so for versions 2018 and 2019, the way that you get your tax table updates is through the internet. This is no longer something that you need to proactively do. You just need to make sure that in Payroll, under the Setup menu, in the Service Notification Maintenance task, that there is an email address set up for a user. Once that's done, then an email will be sent to that person each time a tax update is available. So throughout the year, you will get an email with a link to download and install the tax rate. If that doesn't happen, if you either don't have a person listed here or you don't download and install when you get the email, then when you open Payroll in Sage 100 and you click a task, the system will notify you that there is a tax table available, a new tax update available, and will allow you to click yes to download and install it at that time. So it can be done on the fly as well. You don't want to download or install any tax updates until after the last 2019 payroll has been processed. So if you are in the new year, it is 2020, and you still have 2019 payroll to be processed, do not click yes to download any of those updates until the 2019 payroll has been completed. Some considerations. For version 2017, the timing is important as far as creating a year-end backup. It needs to be done after the last payroll for 2019. No one can be in the system so that you can copy the general ledger, common information, and payroll modules to an archive company code. The tax table update in the IRD will be available approximately December 23rd. You can start checking 4 or 5 days in advance for that. Okay, and the same thing with the W-2 forms and all of the other forms that you'll need for your eFiling or your federal and state tax reporting. Those forms will be available in and around the same time. You need to have an active business care plan again and be on a supported version of Sage 100 and have installed the IRD and the ATRIX forms prior to moving forward with processing your W-2 or your Affordable Care Act forms. Okay. A little bit about Affordable Care Act. The features must be set up and loaded prior to processing Affordable Care Act. If you need assistance with that, RKL can help. Just reach out to RKL support. There's the employer and the employee information that need to be set up under the ACA menu in Payroll. If you have Visual Integrator, this task can be made easier by importing into the files as needed. For version 2017, you want to again make sure that perpetual history is checked in your payroll options. You need to make sure that the employer ACA maintenance has been updated for each year, that your fringe benefits have been processed, and that you have an employer contribution deduction for the reporting of your sponsored health care. Okay. This is just another reminder, and this has been repeated over and over, just it's very important that for your version 2017, this will be the last IRD and tax table update that will be compatible with your version of Sage 100. So it will be key for you to upgrade to your version 2019 for Sage 100 during the first quarter of next year. So there's a link where you can look at the supported Sage information, and there's also a link where you can go to some end-of-year information that are posted on Sage City. Okay, a little bit about the Affordable Care Act. If you have more than 50 employees, you'll qualify for this, and there are IRS rules surrounding that. So if you have more than 50 employees, you may or may not qualify, depending upon a few nuances. So there's a little flow chart. Do you offer health insurance to your employees? If you do, then if the plan is self-insured, then if you have 50 or more full-time employees, you don't need to file 1094B or C, 94 or 95B, but you will need to file 1094C and 1095C. If not, then there are some other answers. So whether or not you're considered a large employer, you can run a large employer report from Sage 100, and it will give you the information that you need, and it will also tell you whether or not you qualify. But you want to double check and read up on the IRS website, because there are laws and regulations surrounding that change constantly. Under the ACA menu in Payroll, there is ACA Employee Maintenance. This is where you would gather the information that's needed for each employee. And for each employee, there is the monthly detail regarding the employee share and the employer share. Okay, and under ACA covered individuals, it lists each person covered by insurance and which months they're covered. The employer maintenance gathers information for the 1094 form. The large employer report allows you to run this and populate the employees and hours by month based on the previous year. So once you've loaded this information once, whether it's by hand or whether it's by the Sage 100 imports, you can update it automatically and then make changes applicable to that next year. Okay, this large employer report is a self-help tool. We can't guarantee the accuracy or how it applies to your individual circumstances, again, because there are so many rules and regulations surrounding the Affordable Care Act, and they do change. So the hours must be reported by month, and because the hours are tracked by pay period in Sage 100, this is a calculation that needs to be performed to arrive at the necessary per month hours, and this is where the large employer report will give you that information. It's an estimate. It may not reflect the actual number of hours worked. So you need to have a deduction code set up for employer contribution for your health care. That is a requirement that will be set up under deduction code maintenance, and then that would be applied to each employee for whom you are covering a portion of their cost. Okay. And Atrix is where you would produce these forms. A 1095 form is generated for each employee who has information in the employee maintenance under ACA. So you would go to Payroll, you would go to the period end menu, and then you would go to either Federal eFiling and Reporting for 2017 or Federal and State Tax Reporting for 2018 and 19. And there's a little bit of information on here. If you would like to import the Affordable Care Act information, there is an article that gives you step-by-step instructions. We can help you with that as well. If you have a very old version of Sage 100, 4.5 or 2013, and you cannot upgrade to 2014 or higher, then you can use the Affordable Care Act worksheet to gather your ACA information. And then that can be imported after you've upgraded to the correct version. If you're paying 100 or more employees, then as of September 1st, there is a data called Component 2 that is required to be reported. It includes the hours worked and the pay information, and it's by race, ethnicity, and sex. Payroll version 2.19.4 has added these fields to make that possible. As of January 1st, 2020, new W-4 forms will be issued by the IRS, which means that any employees that you hire after January 1st or any existing employees that need to make changes will need to use the new forms. Sage 100 versions 2017 and lower do not have the required fields in order to correctly calculate the withholding taxes for any changes that are made, so manual tax calculations will need to be performed, and there is a link to that on this website. If you do need to upgrade, please reach out to your RKL account manager, and they will get you in touch with the proper consultant to get that moving and get that in place as quickly as possible. You may need an upgrade of your server depending upon the age of your server. Windows 7 and 2008R servers are no longer supported after January 1st. Some year-end resources, RKL support. There's our email address. You can also click Help within Sage 100, and you can go to the Sage City Year-End Center, and the link has been provided here. Here are your contacts if you need to either upgrade or you need a product update to be applied to your existing version of Sage 100 to make this possible. Lindsay Palladino is Customer Advocate for the West, and Michelle Lodano is Customer Advocate for the East. Just a word about Sage Summit, which is coming up on May 12th through 14th in Palms Resort, Florida. And there's a link for that as well if you are interested in attending. This is the end of our presentation.